When you think of Halloween, you probably think of costumes and candy, but not everything that happens on that night is fun. Sometimes mysterious events happen that are unexplainable, and some that are even disturbing. Here are 10 unsolved Halloween mysteries. Number 10 is Veronica Safransky. In 1996, 40-year-old Veronica Safransky attended a Halloween party in Warren, Minnesota. Though she attended with a friend, Safransky left the bar later that night without telling her that she was leaving. Witnesses say that she left with Kevin Skirvin, a man who had been convicted of sexual assault on multiple occasions, and she was never heard from again. Skirvin claimed that he had no idea what happened to Safransky despite leaving with her. He was never charged, something that Vonnie's family claimed was the result of lazy police work. Safransky had been dressed in a Pocahontas Halloween costume, part of which was discovered months later at the side of a county road, over 3/4 of a kilometer south of where she was last seen. What happened to Vonnie Safransky is still unknown to this day. Number 9 is Kris Jenkins. On October 31st, 2002, 21-year-old student Kris Jenkins went to the Lone Tree Bar and Grill in Minneapolis, Minnesota to celebrate Halloween. However, he was removed from the bar by security 90 minutes later and was left outside without his phone, keys, or even his wallet. That was the last time that anyone saw him alive. Investigators determined that a fight had taken place in the street, and then Jenkins either walked or was taken to a parking garage next door, where the trail ended with some drops of blood and a red feather, presumably from his Native American costume. Jenkins' body was discovered floating in the Mississippi River 4 months later. Initially declared a suicide or accident, the medical examiner changed the cause of death to homicide, though to this day nobody knows who killed him or why. Number 8 is Cindy Song. On Halloween night in 2001, 21-year-old Cindy Song, a Pennsylvania State University student, vanished. Song had been dressed as a Playboy bunny and was partying with 2 friends at Players nightclub until around 2 a.m. when they went to a friend's house to play video games. Around 4 a.m. she was dropped off at her home, but was never seen again. Investigators found Song's costume eyelashes and her cell phone in her apartment, meaning that she'd at least made it inside before disappearing. However, her purse and wallet were gone. The door to the home was locked from the outside, leading police to speculate that she must have been abducted while going to a nearby 24-hour market, or left with someone that she knew who had killed her. Despite an exhaustive search, to this day no trace of Cindy Song has ever been found. Number 7 is Orange Socks. Orange Socks was the name given to an unidentified woman whose body was discovered on October 31st, 1979, just outside of Georgetown, Texas. Found in a concrete tunnel, she was naked with the exception of a silver, oval-shaped ring on her finger and orange socks on her feet. She had been strangled just hours before she was found, but the only evidence of where she came from was a matchbook from a Holiday Inn hotel in Henrietta, Oklahoma. This led authorities to conclude that she was a hitchhiker. In 1982, serial killer Henry Lee Lucas confessed to the murder, claiming her name was Judy or Joanne. However, he recanted that testimony soon after, and multiple reports claimed that he was far from Georgetown when she died. Unable to be identified, Orange Socks was buried in a grave marked Unidentified Woman, 1979. Number 6 is KRISTI LYNN VORAK. Last seen on October 31st, 1982, 13-year-old KRISTI LYNN VORAK vanished from her home in Tacoma, Washington. Her foster family, who were the last ones to see her, said when interviewed that she had no reason to run away and was a happy girl. VORAK knew the streets of Tacoma very well, always going for long walks, but never getting into any trouble with drugs or prostitution, which investigators ruled out as a motive. One theory surfaced in 1993 that says that she was one of Gary Leon Ridgway, better known as the Green River serial killer's victims, though her remains were not discovered to prove this. Although investigators believe that VORAK is long since deceased, her mother holds on to hope, claiming that even though it's been 35 years since her disappearance, that she knows that her daughter's alive out there somewhere. Number 5 is Johnny Frank Garrett. Though he was executed on February 11th, 1992, Johnny Frank Garrett maintained that he was innocent until the very end, and what's worse is that many others, possibly even including investigators who arrested him, knew that he was too. On Halloween night in 1981, a 76-year-old nun was murdered in St. Francis Convent in Amarillo, Texas. That nun was Sister Tadea Benz, and she was a friend of Garrett, who was 17 years old at the time. Garrett lived across the street from the church and often helped the nuns with chores. Many suspect that the authorities falsified evidence to calm down locals who were calling for the murderer to be caught. Without any suspects, Garrett was the easiest person to pin the crime on, and a confession used to convict him was found to be inconsistent with the crime scene details. It would seem that Garrett confessed under duress, meaning that the actual killer is still out there. Number 4 is Tony Bagley. In October of 1994, 7-year-old Tony Bagley was excited for the same thing that most kids are at Halloween, trick-or-treating. When the day finally came, he put on his skeleton costume and set out, but tragically never came home. Around 6:15 p.m., Tony ran ahead of his mother, aunt, and sister, and had reached the end of the block when the unthinkable happened. A man in a dark-colored hoodie ran out in front of him and opened fire with a handgun, targeting the Bagley family. All 4 were hit with bullets, but while the 3 women suffered non-life-threatening injuries, Tony was shot in the head and soon after died in the hospital. Investigators had few leads, thinking that the shooting could have been gang-related, or maybe the shooter mistook the family for someone else. Regardless, whoever the shooter was never caught. Number 3 is CHAIM WEISS. On November 1st, 1986, just one day after Halloween, 16-year-old CHAIM WEISS was found dead on the floor of his room at a yeshiva, a Jewish Orthodox school in Long Island, New York. Sometime in the night, he had been struck in the head so hard, his spinal column had been severed. Investigators realized that the murderer was likely familiar with Weiss's faith, as the body had been moved to the floor, the lowest and coolest place in the room, and the window had been opened to allow his spirit to leave. After the preliminary investigation, a rabbi was permitted to leave a candle burning in the room, and then it was sealed up. But just 2 days later, a second candle mysteriously appeared, also lit as if it were a memorial as well. Students and rabbis were polygraphed, but no answers came from it. To this day, Weiss's killer has not been identified. Number 2 is David Stone. On October 28, 1988, after a heated argument, 29-year-old California resident David Stone violently attacked one of his friends. Deciding he needed to change, Stone told his family that he'd be back in a few days, but they never saw him again. On Halloween morning, while traveling on foot east of Tucson, Arizona, Stone told a farmer he was looking for the beast. His car was found 5 days later with a note inside of it which read, "They think the word is in the safe. 6 knives in Rob's room. Use buys your tea and use take your chances Halloween." Searchers found his Rolex and 2 pyramids that he'd built out of rocks, but failed to find David. His remains weren't discovered until February of 1992, when 2 hikers came across him near Granite Gap, New Mexico. What happened to David Stone to this day is still unknown. And number 1 is the Son of Sam cult murders. On October 31st, 1981, 39-year-old photographer Ronald Seisman and 20-year-old Smith College student Elizabeth Platzman were murdered in Sisman's Chelsea neighborhood apartment in Manhattan, New York. Both of them had been savagely beaten and shot in the head. There was no sign of forced entry, however, the apartment had been ransacked, leading investigators to believe that the killer or killers were looking for something. Oddly, weeks before the murders occurred, a prison inmate predicted that the crime would happen, saying that he was told by David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer, who allegedly had many followers. Berkowitz claimed that his cult would kill someone on Halloween to stop him from turning over evidence. Unfortunately, despite the link, those killers were never found. Hopefully, this video gives you something to think about as you go out on Halloween night. Keep this in mind for each Halloween going forward, because you never know what's waiting for you in the darkness.